the biggest thing comes down to the family. And there's no way to build a stronger family unit, especially in today's day and age, than homeschooling them. Because once you put them out into the world, that's it. They're out in the world. And
Yeah.
if you're doing that at the age of kindergarten, they're not set up to be able to discern for themselves what's right and wrong, what a good friend looks like, what someone who actually has their best interest in mind looks like. It's easy to get put into peer pressure if you're being raised in a society where, it's more important to look to your peers than to your family structure.
Welcome to the City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My name is John, and if this is your first time tuning in, please take a quick moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and click the bell. And as the conversation goes, you're more than welcome to drop any comments and any questions or anything that you may have. But for now, I'll go ahead and share with you that my guest today is Michelle McCartney. She's a wife, a mother, an entrepreneur, and she's a lover of liberty. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
How many, you've actually been on a few podcasts, right?
Yes, I have. So I actually had my own podcast for a little bit of time. Shortly after my middle child was born, so this is about 2 years ago or so, I had a podcast called Mothers Illuminated. It's still on YouTube if anybody wants to check it out. I did about 20 something episodes on it, and it was all things about motherhood. So I had, somebody on there that's like a dog trainer who talked about different dog breeds for families and stuff like that. We had someone in there who does like hippotherapy, which was actually an interesting episode.
Awesome.
It's physical training with like horses. How cool is that?
Cool.
We had a hypnotherapist on there. We've had a ton of people. We had Second Amendment people on there that were talking about gun rights and kind of gun safety around families and children and moms.
Nice.
There's a ton of stuff. There's actually our three most popular episodes was one where I talked to Carla Garrick for the Free State Project. And another one, I talked to a lady who suffered from Lyme disease for a long period of time until she went down to some clinic in like Mexico and was cured of all the ailments that, had plagued her for years, which was super cool. That was an awesome episode. So that one's really popular. And then the other one is actually one about Wim Hof methods. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. Have you heard of Wim Hof?
Every time we talk, I'm always surprised about no, but I'm always surprised about how many things that are out there that I haven't heard about yet.
Yeah.
So I always think I'm well versed in the areas that I care about. And then every time we talk, you ask me, have you heard of this thing? And I'm like, dang, there's one more thing.
Yes, I am queen of random tidbits of the world.
So what is it?
So the Wim Hof is actually, he's Dutch, and basically he went through a horrible time in his life where his wife committed suicide. He was left with 6 children to raise, and he literally went out into the woods and just jumped into ice cold bath and realized that hey, there's a lot more to life, and that if you could jump in a bath of ice freezing water out outside, then you could pretty much do anything.
Yeah.
And so he started kind of developing this whole big method. And now he's actually being studied by scientists, and it's absolutely amazing what he can do. And the whole concept is it's breath work. So you learn how to, breathe properly to control basically your autonomic nervous system. And you do cold showers, cold plunges, that type of thing. And then stretching. So yoga type stretching things. So it's actually really interesting. And so they do the whole thing. And the concept is it conditions your body to be able to handle stress so that when real life stresses occur, your body literally has no response to it. And it's actually really, really cool the way that it works. And they've done studies and they found that people who did his method just for 10 days or something, they hooked them up to these machines to study all their vitals and everything. And they injected viruses into them or bacteria into them that should have had them vomiting profusely, And
Yeah.
literally, not even did they not have any symptoms. Their heart rate didn't increase. I mean, things you can't control, you know?
Yeah.
And that was the amazing thing about it is it's not only like, oh, I feel great. It's like literally your body is being trained to not have these responses, you know, that it should be
Huh.
biologically having. So
And y'all,
definitely,
that was an
yeah.
episode of y'all's podcast.
Yeah, I talked with,
Okay,
there's a
cool.
lady up here. So I obviously live in New Hampshire. There's a lady up here who's a trainer with the Wim Hof method. So I had her on and we talked about kind of like how the Wim Hof method works. And I've actually done it a couple times. And the first 2 times that I ever did it, I got pregnant both both times. So so I was like, fertility magic. I don't know, you know.
So that's a good thing, though, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, so they do say, right? The Bible does say that children are the, you know, the best blessing you can get from God. So I consider it a good thing.
There you go. That's awesome. And y'all just had y'all's last child, right?
Yep, third.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. Nice.
Yes. But not last. We'll see.
Not like, okay, so your most recent.
Yes.
Gotcha. And have y'all always homeschooled? Or is that just been
Yeah,
more
from the
recent?
start.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, when we were pregnant with my oldest, that was kind of a conversation we had because we weren't super sure. And my husband still retains this idea that maybe we'll send them off to private school for high school. But I highly doubt that's going to happen. And mostly because I think what's going to happen is he's going to see that by the time they're high school age, they're already going to be doing so much better than, you know, a high school level. And at that point, why put them into a private school if they already know all that crap, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, so so actually today was an interesting day. So my oldest is 4, and she asked me today, she said, you know, I really want chocolate filled croissants. I'm like, that sounds delicious, but I don't know how to make those, you know? And she's like, well, why don't we look it up and learn? And I'm like, that's just the most amazing attitude to have. You know, when I was a kid or any of the kids I knew growing up, that was not the attitude. It was just like, oh, I want this and you can't make it. This sucks, you know? But
Like
as a
so many,
homeschool, you know, there's that mentality because that's what we do is anytime she wants to learn something, it's, I don't know the answer to that, but let's look it up and find out, you know?
yeah.
And it's just
Well,
great that she's already got that mentality.
a lot of adults don't even have that mentality.
Right. Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
most people don't grow up learning how to learn. They grow up just learning how to retain information for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And like I don't think that I learned how to learn till I was actually in college. And unfortunately, a lot of people graduate from college not knowing how to learn. So I
Right.
guess
Exactly.
I was lucky. And so like for your kids that like at such a young age already being thinking like, well, we don't know how, so let's find out. Like they're already ahead of most adults.
Right. That's how I see it too. And it's, you know, it's awesome. And they love a lot of things and kids have a natural curiosity about them. What stops that curiosity from continuing into adulthood is mostly parents and the education system. So, you know, like for instance, my 2-year-old, she's obsessed with helping me unload the dishwasher. Every time she does it, it takes 1,001 years to get completed, of course, you know, but what's the alternative? She loses her curiosity and loses her love for helping, you know,
Right.
I don't want to foster that. I want to foster, you know, independence and learning and all of those things. So, you know what, if it takes me longer to do the dishes, then it takes me longer, you know?
Yeah. Because
And
like you,
unfortunately, yeah, no, I'm sorry.
no, that's cool. But like, I don't want to like cut off your train of thought, but you let me. But like you're taking like that unloading the dishes today is going to take 1,000 times longer today, but the reward down the road is much greater than that very minor, insignificant time that it's going to take to unload the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Just today. And so like, it's worth it. Is kind of like my point. It's like it's worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
Letting your kids get involved, learn, fulfill their curiosity, develop responsibility. Like today, and so like like, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny. So when my oldest was about 2 years old, I was a little nervous because, of course, okay, now they're approaching preschool age. I got to make sure like I know what I'm doing because I don't want to like be quote unquote homeschooling them, but then like ruin them,
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there researching all this stuff. And I remember looking up all the things like, okay, what do they learn in preschool? I'm like, okay, they learn their alphabet. All right, she already knows her alphabet. Okay, she learns how to count to 10. She already knows how to count to 10. Like, I'm like going through the list of all the things. And I'm like, besides some fine motor skills, which just won't be, developed till she's a little older, she already knew everything. So then I was like, okay, well, what do they learn in kindergarten? So I'm looking up kindergarten, like, what's the next step, And, so we just basically started there. And now she's 4 years old. So she's technically not even out of preschool yet. And because she's got an early birthday, technically it's going to be another 2 years before she would even be in kindergarten. But she already is in first grade level math. So she can add, subtract, stuff like that. She knows more about space than like most kids in elementary school. I mean, she can identify comets, meteors, like she knows the difference between them. She she knows all her planets, she knows some of the moons, like she just like loves it. She also is like super into Sherlock Holmes. So she's also,
Nice.
she goes between wanting to be an astronaut and a private investigator. So those are her words, not mine. But so it's just interesting. Like, when you actually work with your kid and figure out like, what are they interested in and dive into that. And then you just let them flourish and you realize, what's the point of school? Like, what's the point of sending them somewhere? It's like, if my 4-year-old is this advanced already, why would I send her anywhere else? So.
Nice. There you go.
Yeah.
It's because I was talking with somebody about the schooling the other day in like public school, and a lot of like the public school system is still like outdated.
Mm-hmm.
It was still, because I didn't know this till, it's kind of weird. It bothers me that I kind of went through like public school and never learned these things. But
Yeah.
like the public school system was designed to set people to work in the industrial factories.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the bell system comes from, and that's where the class system comes from, and all those kind of
Mm-hmm.
different things. And so like the whole like the system is like outdated. And then like you
Mm-hmm.
said it earlier, that you're not really taught how to learn there. You're not taught how to satisfy like your curiosity or
Mm-hmm.
like any of those different kind of things. Like, is there anything else that like motivated y'all to like want to homeschool your kids?
Yeah, definitely a lot of things. So obviously we're, lovers of liberty.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the things that they teach in public schools or even in a lot of private schools these days are not things that I necessarily want my children learning. There's a lot of controversy around some of the books that they have in these schools. I know even here in
Yeah.
New Hampshire, I've seen some of them where it's just, straight up pornographic content in elementary schools for kids. And it's like, that's just like my kid, there's no reason for children to be seeing this, Um,
Yes. We have some
and
friends who their kids had access to those books.
right? Isn't that
And
disturbing? Oh my gosh.
it is because like there's a part of me that's kind of like, I read one story and I hear about a book and I'm like, okay, well that must have been something that fell through the cracks, right? That might have
Mhm.
just been like some disgruntled like employee that has a teacher, librarian that has an agenda. They slid that book in the shelf. Then you
Mhm.
start hearing about it on podcasts, and you're like, people are talking about it.
Yeah.
Parents are coming on podcasts like this was in my kid's school, and I'm like, dang, that must be weird. That must be only happening like in California.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm here, I am in Texas, and we have a friend who lives in a fairly kind of rural-ish area, a rural area
Yeah.
that's starting to develop, and their kid had access to it. And then like I'm like, oh dang, this is really real,
Mhm.
and like
Oh
this
yeah.
is not like acceptable. This is disgusting. It's gross. It's evil. Like
They
it's
have
no,
here as well. There's been a couple schools where I've talked to the moms and they have pictures on their phones that their daughters, have sent
yeah,
them from the bathroom of these high schools that have giant litter boxes for furries, right? Because now it's that inclusive. This is how, and
yeah,
they, that the media keeps saying, like, no, this is all a hoax, it's a rumor, it's not real. And like, I haven't been in those bathrooms, so I can't say like as a witness, but I've seen the pictures, I've seen these things, and it's like, how many of, like you said, you hear about it once or twice and you think, oh, that can't be real. Like,
yeah.
but then you start hearing about it more. And now these are people that like I know, and it's like, why would they lie about that?
So I know those. I've heard those stories from friends as well,
Hmm.
and I'm just like,
Yeah.
how? There's
So that's a
no
huge,
bounds.
yeah, that's a huge thing for me is I don't want my kids exposed to that. We teach proper anatomy in our household. So, like, I think it's weird that that's even a thing, but that's how my kids are raised. And I don't want them being confused because that's really what that does.
Yeah,
I've heard of some of the teachers, like there's always weird, creepy sex scandals going on in some of these
yeah.
schools with teachers. And, it just really comes down to like there's no safer place than home. And it's really sad that we live in a world like that. But I'm not about to risk something like that for a mediocre education, like that's
Mediocre is generous.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't understand why anybody would put their kids in public schools. And that's not to be judgmental by any stretch of the imagination, but just that I think more people don't realize that there's so many more options out there and how doable homeschooling is. Like my husband, he works, 9 to 5, he works his job. I do a lot of entrepreneur stuff. And even if I have to go somewhere, I can always hire someone to watch them for a few minutes so I can run out and do a meeting somewhere. Or, sometimes I'll even ask the person, hey, I have some kids. Can I bring them with me? And, you know, sometimes we do that. So there's always ways to work about it. I know people who both of them work full time, and they have a family member watch the kid during the day and then they just do the schooling at night. One
yeah,
of the things that I think was really beneficial during the whole COVID thing when everyone went remote with their schooling was a lot of parents were able to see what the actual education was like for their kids because it was in their home now.
yeah,
And I think the biggest thing that I saw from that was parents realizing how much time was wasted. The kids are at the school for 8 hours when the reality was that it could have done, it takes 2 to 3 hours to do all their work. So when you look at it like that, it's like as long as you have someone to watch your kid during the day, you can do the schooling at the end of the day and it doesn't take long. It's really not something that, and if you have a teenager, teach them some responsibility and have them do it themselves during the day,
yeah,
while you're gone at work. It's, most of this stuff you can have online curriculums and it doesn't have to be super expensive either. You know, I know Ron Paul has a curriculum, and the
yeah.
Ron Paul curriculum I think is like $200 to $300, which sounds like a lot, but if that's the cost for the whole year, like that's not.
Whoa, there are some public school districts spend $50,000 per child per
Yep,
year. So when you compare that to $200-300 for a curriculum, that's pretty
exactly.
affordable.
Right, exactly. And a lot of this stuff really is. So like, we do, I mean, most of the stuff you can find on YouTube, you can find YouTube stuff. There's Khan Academy, which is free. There's so many free resources. It's super easy to put together your own curriculum these days. And the reality is most of the stuff they learn in school, you're not ever going to use. And I kind of take that to heart. Like, there's no reason my kids don't need to know how to balance chemical equations unless they want to be a chemist, you
Yeah,
know? And so, like, obviously, there are parts of that I think are important to learn about the periodic table, learn about how these elements interact with each other. Like, I do think that there's a huge portion of that that's relevant because you want to learn about the world that you live in and how it works together. But, do you need to go so far as, like, covalent bonds and all these like crazy things that like I say that word I don't even remember what it is. Why? Because I haven't had to hear it in like over 12 years.
yeah. I didn't even know what you were talking about.
You're right. Exactly. So it kind of comes down to like, teach them the cores and then everything else, figure out what they're interested in, have them master it. If we did that, imagine how many 18-year-olds would be ready to enter the workforce and would be killing it, because they'd have mastery in a craft that they love.
Yeah, something that they love, something that's useful, something
Right?
that equips them to run a business, provide
Hmm.
a valuable service.
Yeah.
And those are all the courses that they seem to be weaning out.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like home ec isn't really a thing anymore. Like a lot of people I know, their kids don't have like a shop class, or they're
Hmm.
not learning how to tinker on cars or anything like that. A lot of places aren't doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and like you said a second ago, like I think you and I are pretty close in the same age.
I think so.
Yeah, but like when we were growing up, there wasn't very much resources for homeschooling.
Hmm.
But like you said today, like there is a remarkable like
Hmm.
amount of resources. options and ideologies like on how to go about it.
Oh yeah.
Like it's not like where it used to be where like you stayed home in your bedroom and flipped through packets all day long, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
But like there's co-ops and there's different online resources,
Hmm.
curriculums, and that kind of thing. And so like, do you think it's a good thing that through the COVID that there is a rapid increase in parents wanting to homeschool, or do you think it's going to have like some negative side effects?
Well, so I mean, with anything, you're going to
Yeah,
have pros and cons.
yeah,
So I've seen kind of both sides of them. So my husband grew up in a household that homeschooled about half the time. Their idea of homeschooling though was, coming from an abusive household. So sometimes what you'll find is people who are abusive and they homeschool basically to shelter their child so they can get away with doing all the things that they want to
yeah,
do. So of course, with increases in homeschooling, you're going to find situations like that, which of course are horrible and tragic, in their own.
yeah,
That being said, I don't think anything like that is going to increase because that's kind of been the way that they've done things throughout history. Throughout history, you're going to find people who, hey, if I need to hide my child from the public, I'm going to homeschool them.
yeah,
So I think that most of the people who are going to be led to homeschooling are going to be led to it for the right reasons, which would generally be, I don't agree with the things that are being taught in my school, the school. I don't know how to do Common Core math, so I don't really want to deal with that. And being able to teach them all the things that you want to teach them, having full resources. Like you said, it's easier now than it's ever been to homeschool. And even there's a ton of families right now that are doing a world schooling type of thing. So there's so many different variations of homeschooling these days. And one of them that's really gaining popularity is called world schooling. And so basically, it's the idea that you travel the world with your children and you can teach them anywhere. And,
yeah.
and that they learn so much by going to different cultures. They learn different languages by visiting the actual country. It's just, it's really cool how things go. You don't need to be tied down anymore to a school district. There's so many more options and there's so many free resources. And like I said, as long as you can find someone to watch your kids during the day, if you're working, anybody can homeschool these days. It's really not a money thing. It really just matters how much money you want to throw into it because you could essentially do it for free, if not close to free.
Nice. So how has, because I think we touched on just pretty decently, like how
Mhm.
your, I guess your political ideology has
Mhm.
influenced y'all's desire to homeschool. How has y'all's faith played a role in that?
I think that's kind of goes hand in hand in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
good.
Again, yeah, I was going to say, when you look at some of those things, like all
Yeah,
the different genders and different sexual orientations, those are things that I don't necessarily think align with our faith. And so I think it's, that's a huge part of it as well. But the biggest thing is like, I mean, did they have public schools in biblical times? No, because that's ridiculous. Like that's not, you know. I think the biggest thing comes down to the family, and there's no way to build a stronger family unit, especially in today's day and age, than homeschooling them. Because once you put them out into the world, that's it. They're out in the world. And
yeah,
if you're doing that at the age of kindergarten, they're not set up to be able to discern for themselves what's right and wrong, what a good friend looks like, what someone who actually has their best interest in mind looks like. It's easy to get put into peer pressure if you're being raised in a society where it's more important to look to your peers than to your family structure. You know what I mean?
right.
um, so that's definitely played a huge part in it. And a lot of times you see in these schools now, I know some of the local ones here now have like you can't find a Bible study or a Christian group in any of them, but you can find a satanic group or these, LGBTQ groups, which, I'm a live and let live kind of person. If someone wants to live that way, then that's up to them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to agree with it.
Right.
And
And your
I
tax dollars shouldn't have to pay for it.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And I don't want my kids in an environment where they think that that's normal because I don't think it
yeah.
is. Um, you
So
know,
y'all don't have like FCA up there?
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, I wonder if that's a Texas thing. It's the
What's FCA?
Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
No, I've never heard of that.
Huh. Okay. I wonder if that's
Uh,
a Texas thing.
I'll have to look it up. I do know there's different groups. Like there's
Yeah.
I've heard of like I think it's Heritage Girls is a really popular one. It's like an alternative to Girl Scouts, but it's
Oh,
faith
okay.
based,
Yeah.
which is really cool. Actually, it looks like a great program. And there's some things like along those lines. There's a lot of like 4-H groups are really popular out here. So they do a lot of groups and extracurricular activities. There's also a lot of faith based co-ops out here as well. So you'll find like a lot of, Christian co-ops or people of similar faiths all get together and basically take turns educating all the children, that type of thing.
Gotcha.
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of that out here actually, which is really cool. And I think you'll find a lot more of faith-based families tend to homeschool for those exact same reasons. It's just you don't want to put your kids into, the public school where everything is not exactly of godly domain.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, how did you find your entrepreneurial spirit?
uh, so, all right. So back when I was pregnant with my first, I was actually working for a company and I collected student loan debt for the federal government. And that was like the worst
Huh.
job in the whole world. I know. I
Have you
know.
repented for that?
Hey, you know what? Everyone knows what they're doing when they take out student loans. I don't want to hear that. Although I will say you'd be surprised how many times you got the whole, well, I never used it. Or, it's like, that's not how loans work, but okay. So yeah, so I did that for a while. And then while I was pregnant with my first, I actually had a lot of pregnancy discrimination. So much so that my midwives actually urged me to report to them to the state, basically, for harassment. And I just decided, like, I'm pregnant. I don't want to deal with any of this. So I just quit pretty much. My husband was making enough to be able to support us. All my stuff was pretty much extra, which was putting us in a really good spot. But at that point, it just wasn't worth it. So I ended
Okay.
up just quitting, stayed home, had my daughter. And then shortly after that, we said, like, we had enough money to pay the bills and stuff, but we weren't really making anything extra. And so I said, I kind of want to get back into being able to work and bring in some money. But I also knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I didn't want anybody else raising my child. And so I kind of had to figure out, how do I do this from home, where I can be with her. And so, of course, like any stay-at-home mom, I explored all the MLMs, I explored blogging, I explored all these different things. And of course, none of which were fruitful. But I learned a lot each step of the way. And then every new thing I tried, I kind of used what I learned to build on it. And so it's been about 5 years since I've really been exploring the whole entrepreneur journey. And I'd say within the past 3 years is really when a lot of it kicked up. And what happened was back in 2020, I believe it was, I actually started a bookkeeping business. And I taught myself bookkeeping so that I had a skill that was marketable, because I quickly realized that all these MLMs and these types of things were just not going to work out.
Yeah.
And I figured I need to have a skill that I could sell so that I could actually, do this. And what kind of things could I do working from home that's not like on the phones all the time, because I have a baby and all that. And so I ended up coming across bookkeeping. So I taught myself bookkeeping, got a few, textbooks, did that, found a friend who owned a business. He let me kind of practice on his stuff and, do his for
Nice.
free for a bit. And so after that, I got comfortable enough and I started marketing myself, and I had the business for about 3 years, was able to scale up to a point where I had about 2 other employees that were basically doing the bookkeeping. And then what happened was when you hire employees, obviously you have to make sure that they're doing the work properly. One of them wasn't really working. And so I was paying them and nothing was really happening. And then I was losing clients because of it. And so I ended up letting him go, and then ended up like having to kind of figure out how to salvage everything, because at this point I wasn't making a whole lot of money because I had lost a lot of clients. And I never was able to fully recover from that. So in
Yeah.
the end, I ended up having to kind of shut down the whole thing. So that's essentially what happened there. And it was a bad management move on my side, but I learned a lot. So again,
Right.
it's just another thing like that. And at that point, I could have just fired the other person as well and done the work myself, but I'm not passionate about bookkeeping. I really didn't want to kind of go back to square one. You know what I mean? And at that point, I was really trying to make a homeschooling center work because I am passionate about homeschooling. And so I was putting a lot of resources into this homeschooling center, which I had up for about 5 months, until that one, at the same time, we ended up having to close both of them down because we just had like no money and we couldn't support to keep them both up and going. So that's what ended up happening. And then once we closed both of those down, which is actually funny because now it's been about a year since I closed both of those down. And now I
Has it
see,
already been that long?
yes, it has. It's,
Jeez.
yeah, because I closed them down last September and it's August now. So it's been about a
Oh,
year and they're
man.
closed down. I know, right? It's been a while. And I will tell you, it's the funniest thing because now I'm seeing all over the state these little homeschooling centers popping up.
That's cool.
So I was just joking with a friend of mine, and a few of them I actually know personally that I inspired it because they reached out to me and said, I saw what you were doing, I loved it, and I went with it, and now I'm opening up this place. So it was really cool. But I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and I was like, I was a year too early. you know?
You were ahead of your time.
Yeah, exactly. So
And through that, you inspired other people.
right, exactly. But you know what? I inspired people, and it was a very expensive mistake, but I learned a lot. So I'll cut it even. But after that, and at the same time when that happened, I actually found out we were expecting baby number 3.
Yeah.
And that was part of the choice as well, because at that point I was working ridiculous, like long hours. I pretty much wasn't even ever really present. Even though I had my kids with me, I wasn't really present for them. And that's not the kind of mom I wanted to be. And, we didn't have the money to keep up everything. And then I found out I was pregnant with baby number 3. And I realized I really just, I realized my priorities had gone completely off, and so we ended up closing those 2 down. And I just wanted to focus on family, kind of just reevaluate where I was at. And during that time, I pretty much realized that I wasn't really the best mom at that time because I was away all the time, and even if they were with me, I still was kind of like, hey, be quiet because I got to do these things. And,
Oh, right.
and spending time with them again made me realize how much I really didn't know that much about them anymore, and so I kind of had to like relearn all of that and reconnect with them, which was really sad. Like I didn't want to have to be put in that position, and so I
Right.
realized I need to step back. Like my ego of this, business tycoon type of thing was really taking over. And that's not what I wanted. That's not what, God wanted for this family at all. And, that's not what ever what God wants, And so
Mhm.
it really was a big, reality check. And so once I spent some time with them, I realized, okay, I like being here. We do still need extra money, especially with all the crazy inflation. So I was
Yeah.
kind of taking some odd jobs for a while, like, hey, if anybody has any odd jobs, like I just need a little extra money because, we still got bills to pay and everything's getting more and more expensive. And so I was doing that for a bit. And one of the things that popped up a lot was social media management, because that's something I'm very good at. And I'm naturally on social media all the time. And I network like crazy. So I'm in a lot of different groups and organizations, and people know me and, respect me and all those things. And so I reached out to some people, and everyone was like, yeah, like definitely do my social media because I know you're awesome at it. So instantly I was doing like 4 or 5 people's social media stuff. And so I was just kind of doing that. And I was like, and then I realized like, wow, this is actually because I know social media really well. So I'm able to automate a lot of things. I realized this is really lucrative, and it's something I actually enjoy doing. And because I can automate so many things, it's not something that I'm like glued to my computer. I can still be there for my kids. I can work it around their schedule and I can kind of do both.
Right.
And so that's what I started doing. And I'm still doing that. And now it's kind of growing and expanding. So another thing I just recently picked up is now I'm selling solar panels as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really like about that is it's kind of a similar situation. So I do all self-gen. For a while I was still training, they had me like on the dialer and stuff. But now that I'm out of training, I said, I just want to do self-gen. I don't want to be on the dialer. I want to be with my kids. I don't want to be glued to a screen. And so now it's pretty much just like, hey, I post stuff on Facebook. I've already done about 3 or 4 different consultations, and I think I've been active for a month. So that's pretty good numbers.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and these are high commission. So it really wouldn't take, like, if I made one sale a month, I would be doing pretty good type of deal. So so it's a nice setup because it's a lot more relaxed. I just kind of get to do my thing, and then people reach out to me, I book it, and then I do it, and then that's it. So it's been a really good fit for our family because the amount of time, like, I'm making about as much money right now as I made through the peak of my bookkeeping time period, but I'm working probably about a fifth of the time.
Nice.
And so this has been so much better for my, just my lifestyle, being able to figure out a way to use the things that I know. And these are all things that I've built up over time. I couldn't have done what I'm doing now 5 years ago because I didn't know any of the things. I had to try stuff. I had to fail. I had to, experiment. I had to learn different skill sets. I had to do all these things. And now I actually have people scouting me. I had 2 people tell me basically, I want you to apply for this job because I think you'd be great. And they're both awesome jobs that pay, more than what my husband's making. And so I even told him, I'm like, if I end up getting offered this, then we might have to reevaluate some of these things. But the great thing is, even these jobs, they're all remote, work from home, and very flexible hours. I can pretty much make my own schedule. So, like, we're in a much better place now, but it took the 5 years of networking, of learning all these skills and doing all these things to get to where I am now. And it's funny because a lot of times, like, I, hear from other entrepreneurs, like, how do you get to the point of success? How do you get to this point? How do you, break through that awkward time period? And it's like, really, I just think the biggest thing is consistency. Just keep going for it, because good things happen over time, and one of my favorite things that I've ever heard was, the time is going to pass anyway, so might as well work towards it, and I think that's so true. It's like, at the end of the day, what are you doing? Are you binge watching Netflix, or are you doing things to, get your skills up, And there's nothing wrong with taking the time to watch a show every once in a while. But, it's funny. I hear people telling me all the time, like, I don't know how you do it with all your businesses and your kids and your, and it's like, don't get me wrong. There are days where it's really hard, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, I don't know. There's so much time in the day. How do people not get things done? It's, I don't know. It's, you just do it. Like, I don't have time to watch TV and do all those things. I just do what I got to get done, Yeah. And I think that's an important mentality that a lot of entrepreneurs really have to be successful,
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody at the end of the day, everybody does what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody has to be willing to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do what you want to do. Even when you think you're being forced to do something you don't want to do, at the core of it, you did it because you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you're going to a job you don't like, you go to that job ultimately because you wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hard thing to admit, but you have to be willing to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you would be finding a different job.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd
be finding a different job. You'd be finding a different opportunity. You'd be finding something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. Let's assume you actually do sleep 8 hours. That means you have 16 hours for the rest of the day. And you might have probably spent 3 or 4 hours of that binge watching something.
Right. Exactly.
And, like, that's not like a high and mighty self-righteous, like, thing to say, but that is, you chose to spend 3 or 4 hours binge watching something on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. And so that 3 or 4 hours you spent doing that, you could have been spent doing something else. Or maybe you could have spent an hour watching a show with there's nothing wrong with, and then spent the other 2 or 3 hours doing something else, like finding an opportunity, refining a skill, or doing whatever it was that you could have been doing. Working out, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And, like, I think you and I both are willing to admit that we don't have it all figured out.
And nobody does.
Yeah. But like you said, you're not where you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There's a lot of growing pains that got you to where you are now.
Oh, absolutely.
Same with us. Like, I started my business in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I lost money the first couple years, but now I'm not losing money.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's a really lot of awkward, painful mistakes along the way. And I hope that I'm making less of them today.
Right. You'll find out in a few weeks, right?
I'll figure out in a few weeks that I made a bunch of different painful mistakes.
No, but I mean, we all do it, and we're all faced with situations. So like, again, like
Yeah.
now I have this, these things that are growing and doing well, but now I've got these people that are, offer that are telling me to apply for these jobs,
Right.
that sound great, but I don't know what the reality of that is versus what the reality of this is. So a lot of it is going to take some careful consideration to figure out what's the best move for our family. Um, and ultimately what the goal is, like what is the goal of, what you're trying to accomplish. For some people, the goal is literally just, I want to make as much money as possible. Well, if that's the case, then you go wherever the higher paycheck is,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people that really want to integrate work with their lifestyle. And I think that's smart because then you're looking at a sustainable goal, right?
Yeah.
If something's sustainable, then it aligns with who you are as a person. It aligns with, you know, what you're trying to accomplish, things that you enjoy doing. You can chase dollars as much as you want, but you're going to get burnt out eventually.
Right.
And so the biggest thing is figuring out like, okay, who am I? What are my skill sets? What am I looking to get out of life? And what kind of skills do I actually want to learn? Right? Because maybe you don't have all the skill sets yet, but by doing that job, you'll learn some other things that'll get you there, and I think that's important too. So figuring out all those things, I think, is really crucial because a lot of people, and this is another thing that I learned is, especially with the homeschooling center, I had this idea in my head of the kind of entrepreneur I wanted to be. I thought this would be the funnest thing ever to run a homeschooling center and, be able to do all that type of stuff. And in a lot of ways it was fun. I enjoyed myself during a lot of it, but the type of business that was is not aligned with what I was looking for, and I
Totally.
learned that after a few months, having a physical location that I have to get up and go to every single day and lug my kids to. And, especially on the days when I was tied up at the center and I realized that I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to be tied up to a physical location. I
Yeah.
want to be able to, if I want to take a Tuesday to bring my kids to the park, I want to be able to do that. If I, want to go and take a vacation, I want to be able to do that. With the center, I was not able to do any of those things because I had to be there. I didn't have any employees. I didn't have anything like that, and so these are the types of things that people need to ask themselves. I've heard a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I need to make some money. How can I do these? How can I make money? I was like, okay, well, what kind of things are you good at? What kind of things do you enjoy? And a lot of times like, oh, nothing, like, and you realize quickly it's like, okay, well, you're an employee then. You're not an entrepreneur, because an
Yeah.
entrepreneur can figure out like, what are these things that I can do and how can I market them? Whereas if you're too afraid to figure out what it is you can do and what skills you have that are marketable, you're not going to make it as an entrepreneur. And it's a harsh truth, unfortunately. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, you really have to be a self-starter. You have to be someone who's willing to look
Yeah.
at yourself objectively. And that's a really hard thing, especially in our society where we're all told that we're all right somehow. And, that everything we do is perfect and you shouldn't apologize to anybody and you shouldn't have to want to be better at anything because you're perfect the way you are. Well, that's
Just
all great and dandy, but that's not going to produce anything that's worthy,
yeah, it's a complete lie also.
Yeah, it is because, we all have our faults and that's fine because
Yeah.
we're all human. That's part of it. Right. And you have to be comfortable with that, and being able to sit there and say, what are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that I'm not so good at? And part of that was with the bookkeeping business. I realized very quickly, this is not for me because I do not like doing bookkeeping. So for me to sit
Yeah.
here and do all this work, it's like I could do it, but I don't really want to. And if I don't want to, that means that I'm going to have to, make some tough choices and I'm not going to be happy and I'm going to make more mistakes and and so you just got to figure it out. It's, just thinking about who you are and what it is that you can do that can make money and help you succeed and figuring out how to integrate it into the lifestyle. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think like you were saying, it's about figuring out like what you're aligned to do and what your conviction is
Yeah.
to do. And I think because we all have different skill sets, and I truly believe that like God gives all of us different skills and
Right.
gives all of us different personalities so that we can honor him in our own unique individual way. And so one like some way that someone else may be honoring God may not sit right with me, and not because, I don't think it's appropriate, but rather because I couldn't pull it off as good as they could, because you
Yeah.
have to be aligned in some way to what you're doing. Um, and you have to have that personality and skill set. Not everybody can be a preacher, not everybody can be a pastor, not everybody
Yeah.
can be, you have to figure out, like, what is it about me that's unique, that's my God-given talent that I can use to, do this. And one of the things that I've been finding is being able to work remotely is a skill set in itself. And so if I'm given that opportunity to be able to work remotely and, do this and be able to support the family and do all those things. And, my husband's working on some things as well. He does construction. What he does can't really, you can't really do the lifestyle that way.
Yeah.
But he's working towards learning, like, all the tech stuff to get into cybersecurity, and other, tech related things, which are all things like a lot of people can do remotely. So we're really starting to go into the more remote pathway, and just realizing too that, us all being together as a family, that family unit is so important. And especially in today's day and age, where I see the corruption of the family unit just constantly, divorces, marriages shambling, kids that are just being abused, or, being pushed into things that they're not bred to do.
Yeah.
It's just, it's horrible, the things that are going on out there. And so I think the biggest thing that anybody can do is figure out how they can protect their family unit and use their God-given talent to be able to do that, to be able to protect the family unit, to be able to make money, to be able to live a life worth living, and be able to show people that, like, this is who God is, and keep talking about it. I do a lot of stuff on social media, and I'm not shy on there about who I am. You know that. um, and I think that there's good and bad stuff about that too. It's not always, rainbows and unicorns on my Facebook page. Sometimes it's,
Right.
wow, I learned a really tough lesson today, um,
Sometimes you're on there stealing my memes too.
yeah. Well, that one was just golden. I couldn't help it.
That's okay. That one wasn't actually mine to begin with.
But I just think, like, and that's in its own skill. That's its own way to connect with people too, because I can't tell you how many times I've been having a tough day or something's bothering me, and I'm, kind of on Facebook and scrolling around, and I'll see a quote or something, or a Bible quote, or even just like a message that somebody does. Actually, our chiropractor, I love him to death, because every single day he does a 365 days to manna is what he calls it. And every single day he posts, Bible quote with like some commentary about it.
Huh.
And I love those, and so I get to, I'll go read those, and, but I can't see how many times I'll see something on Facebook and I'm like, that's exactly what I needed to hear, to
Yeah.
pop me out of whatever it is I was experiencing. And, things like that. Like, sometimes it's so like serendipity that it's just, that there's some sort of divine intervention going on, that was placed there at that moment for me to see it, and maybe not even me, maybe somebody else, but then I saw it, and it inspired me too. And so, I think that we all have our own way of being able to reach others. And, for some people, like, for instance, if I'm sitting here doing this digital nomad life and I'm making connections with people all over the world, how many people will I inspire that will also see my content about, my relationship with God? How many people will look at that and say, wow, I want to be like that. I want to have that kind of, environment. I want to have that kind of family, those opportunities. And when I sit there and post on Facebook about how the only reason I'm doing all this is because God's given me the opportunities to do this,
Yeah,
how
for
many
sure.
people is that going to affect and inspire,
In
and we
today's
all have
world,
that
like,
potential. Yeah.
yeah, in today's world, that is a huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can be, for better and for worse, literally. Like,
Yeah.
we're connected to more people than ever within history.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, there's an opportunity for us to connect with, inspire, influence so many people with our faith, with our skill sets, with our business, with our everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in a way that most people would have never dreamed of, even
Mm-hmm.
50 years ago. Like, it's
Right. Yeah.
crazy. And it literally is for better and for worse.
Yeah. I know. Well, it's funny to me because I was from the 90s. And when I was growing up, I mean, we had the AIM chat rooms and we had,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, we had the old hunky Sony computer and we had,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when people like the Razor phones were just coming out and everyone was like losing their mind because they weren't big
Yeah.
and bulky anymore,
They were
and now
thin.
it's, yeah, exactly. It's like the thinnest, it was like thin as a razor, right? That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, now it's like everybody's got literally at the palm of their hands anything you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And that's what's incredible to me is because, in today's day, like I always say, in the age of information, which is really where we're at right now, the age of information, ignorance is a choice.
Yeah.
It's like at any point you can learn whatever skills you wanted to learn.
Right.
There's really nothing stopping anybody. You can find resources, and it's funny because you hear all the time like, oh, well, they're from a poor family or whatever, and they don't have as much, privilege and all these things. And it's, obviously I understand that that's true to some degree, but at the same
Right.
time, there's a lot of opportunity to learn whatever skills you want on YouTube, which is free. So it's like,
Yeah.
at some point you got to stop being a victim and just take control of your life,
What's free for you and me is free for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, I
Yeah.
mean, that's not complicated. That's not profound.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
For as much as people like us want to criticize and make fun of YouTube, and there's a lot of reasons to do it, the
Yeah.
same free classes are on there for everybody.
Oh yeah.
The account is free. Like there's not a maximum on your usage. Like there's free Wi-Fi everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And like not just YouTube, but like there's so many like there's an endless supply of free resources to educate you on everything.
Yeah.
And it's growing every day.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And that's why like my biggest thing that I always try to motivate people to do is just like, really look at yourself and, like we kind of said earlier, is everything you do is a choice. And just
Yeah.
realizing that you have the control to make different choices if you want your life to be different, and the journey for entrepreneurship is that, it's realizing that, hey, I could sit here and watch TV or I could learn a new skill or
Yeah.
I could, go out with my friends and hang out at a bar, or I could, go take classes and lessons, or even just like you said on YouTube for free, learn a language or something,
And the reality of it is none of those things that you just said are wrong.
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
But it's like what's the most important thing to you at that moment?
Hmm.
Like maybe there's nothing wrong with going out with your friends for the night and having a really good time.
Hmm.
That's a natural thing that by God you were created to enjoy, so go enjoy that.
Yep.
But like if you don't like your job, if you're not satisfied with where you are in life, you don't think you're making enough money, you don't like being in the corporate environment every day, then maybe you don't need to go out that night. Maybe you need to go spend your time doing something else.
Hmm.
Maybe you had a really stressful day and you just need to like be at home and just relax,
Hmm.
pop some popcorn, watch a show. Nothing wrong with that. But it's like, what is it that's most important to you that day or in your life right now? And
Yeah,
like, we all
exactly.
make choices, which I think is like the theme of the conversation. Is like we all make choices.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I did want to give you an opportunity to shout out your shirt and like what that's about.
Oh. So yes, it says one vaccine is too many, and then it has a hashtag for Brave Like Nick. So if you look up that hashtag, you'll see all of it. But basically what happened was this guy, Nick, he was actually from California. They just moved to Texas within the past year or so. And basically he was a firefighter and he had to get the Tdap vaccine for his job. And so after getting it, he ended up getting basically paralyzed. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong for the longest time. And they did all these studies. I think it took them like a year to figure out what was actually wrong. And then finally, luckily his wife is a nurse, so his wife did tons and tons of research and came across all these different specialists. And eventually they were able to figure out that the vaccine basically gave him tetanus. And so after a year of having tetanus, which thank goodness he didn't die, he ended up starting the immunoglobulin treatments, which is what they do for people with tetanus. And so now he still gets them. I think it's like every month or every 2 months or so, he has to get an injection or a series of injections. And basically he feels better after getting them for about a week or 2 weeks. And then he starts feeling crappy again. And basically what it does is it helps to keep it in check. And at this point, they don't know if he'll ever get better or if he'll ever be able to get off of it. The guy's 30. I mean, they've got like 4 kids that are all young kids, you know. I mean, he's not an old dude. It's like he's still got his whole life ahead of him. And, he used to be very, very active. Now he can't do any of those things anymore. His wife had to kind of pick up the slack and start working. So now she works, and he is not able to work. But I think I would assume he collects disability at this point. But I do know, like, for a while there was some issues with workers' comp, because they were trying to get workers' comp to cover all the medical expenses, because he was in and out of hospitals for an entire year. And workers' comp kept saying that they weren't going to do it because it wasn't a work-related injury, but it was a work, literally the only reason he got it was because his work mandated it. And so I think I want to say at the end, he ended up getting the workers' comp, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But anyway, so that's kind of the story of Nick. And for a while, shortly after all of that, they were actually selling these shirts online to try to raise money for medical expenses, because at that point, workers' comp still wasn't paying anything. He hadn't been working. She wasn't working because she was a stay-at-home mom. They had no money to pay the bills, feed the kids, much less the medical bills. So they were doing a whole big campaign and selling a bunch of shirts. And so ended up buying one.
Nice.
So,
and are they still they're still raising funds?
I don't believe I've seen anything about them raising funds. They have a house now in Texas. So they sold their place in California, went to Texas. It's much cheaper there, obviously. And the wife is now doing work. So I think she worked for like a stable or something with horses, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so that's what they do. And then I think he stays home with the kids and they homeschool and, do all that cool stuff.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. It was fun.
Yeah. I know, it's always fun.
Yeah, it is, right? There's, like a lot of these episodes, there's always a lot of things that are covered, but you can't always get to everything.
Yeah.
And so I would really, maybe we can do it again sometime, and we can, I'd like to talk more about, entrepreneurship, and what that means, and the opportunities that are available for that right now. Because I think one of the positive things that came out of all the COVID garbage was a lot of people are allowed to work from home now. And I think that's a really good thing. I think there's a lot of opportunity, I think, right now for a lot of people's life to revolve around their home and their family, instead of an office that's 30 minutes or an hour away.
Yeah.
From and so I think that's a good thing for most people. And I think it's awesome that a lot of people are not being a part of your family is no longer a part-time thing, but being can be a full-time thing now. I think that's great. And I think it's really awesome and so that creates a lot of, and then with that is a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurship. And I think I'm excited about how there's more opportunity for entrepreneurship, more flexibility within that, allowing the economy to come out of the household like it did for so long. Even in America, it's very only in the past century that so much of the economy was moved out of the household. And so I'm really excited about that. And I think that's what y'all are working on. Y'all's education is coming out of the household. The economy is starting to come out of the household, and that could become a thing in reality for you and your husband together. And and y'all are looking at a lot of different ways that y'all are going to be able to explore with that. And I just think it'd be fun to talk more about that, honestly.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I'd be happy to chat on that, right now if you're interested. But basically, I mean, if you look at the whole entrepreneurial landscape right now, we're at a really interesting time. And what I mean by that is exactly what you were just saying. With COVID, a lot of jobs went remotely. And a lot of companies are trying to bring it back. But a lot of people are kind of saying, no, if I can do this job remotely, why would I go back into an office? And rightfully so, right? And so what we're seeing now is an interesting power dynamic now, where companies can't find workers because workers don't want to do whatever it is these companies, are demanding, because now they've gotten a touch of something else, And so what we're seeing now is what I believe is going to be a very changing landscape. What I think is going to happen is, for the longest time, we've been doing big business. Big businesses have kind of dominated a lot of the market.
Yeah.
And what I see happening now is people are leaving that to do their own entrepreneurial journeys, which is going to create a lot of small business, which means that small businesses will work together more, and kind of create more localized pockets of work. But what's interesting is, unlike any other time in history in which this has happened, we're now on a global scale because we're all connected through Zoom, we're all connected through the internet. Whereas the last time when everything was hyper localized, it was truly hyper localized because we didn't have any of this technology. So I truly believe that everything is going to go a much more global landscape. And I truly believe that within the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot more digital nomad type of lifestyles. We're going to see a lot more things like that, because once we make that transition, once these smaller businesses kind of get a little bit smaller, the ones that aren't able to survive are going to go under. Smaller businesses are going to take that place. This is kind of my prediction, at least. This is what I'm seeing just by observing from afar. And I'm seeing because I'm in a lot of different groups with entrepreneurs on Facebook. There are new people reaching out all the time. There's a huge market right now because, again, things keep getting more and more expensive.
Right.
So one of the markets is a lot of stay-at-home moms are coming out and saying, how can I make more money for my family? Because things are getting more and more expensive and I just have a need to work at this point. But a lot of them don't want to leave their kids. They don't, or maybe they don't mind leaving the kids, but they can't make something that's makes enough to justify putting them in childcare, So it's all that like juggling act. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of this is going to come down to small businesses that interact on a global scale. And I really do see it going that way. And so we're kind of at an interesting point where the people who are hopping on that train now, I think in 5 to 10 years will be a lot more successful because you kind of got in on it early while it was happening. But I do think it's going to be a growing trend that we're going to be seeing this. And again, I think it comes down to people need to figure out what's their marketable skill, what are things that they're interested in learning, and figure out how to market it on a smaller scale. Networking is always huge. I still, even today, I had about 2 or 3 people asking me about doing solar sales. I was like, hey, here's the thing to onboard with the company, have at it, But, I see this stuff all the time. I used to get a lot of people that would reach out and say, hey, I want to start a business. How do you do this? And then I'd give them a bunch of, advice. And I've heard back from a lot of them. There's someone that I know that was a social worker making 40 to 50,000 a year. And he said, I have my master's in psychology. So what I really want to do is have my own practice and be a clinical psychologist. And I said, okay, well, what do you need to do that? And he's like, I'm not too sure. I said, okay, well, here's the state, licensing requirements and all this stuff. I said, call the offices, find out what you need to do. I said, then after that, the first thing you would do is set up your LLC, get your EIN number, and basically give them a step-by-step guide on here's how to set up a business, just the fundamentals. And I ended up hearing from him. I never heard from him again. And then about a year or 2 after that, he reached out to me and he's like, just wanted to let you know, I'm hiring people now. I have my own office with a location,
That's awesome.
And yeah, he's like, I'm making bank now and I can support my growing family. And and he's hiring more people and, he takes a holistic approach to mental health. So they have, financial things that they help people out with. They help people get jobs. They help people with art therapy. He does so many things in his clinic now. And I was like, that's just amazing, and to be able to help someone be a good impact on the world is also just a great feeling too. But I think a lot of people are realizing that even our family doctor, I was just over there to do the checkup with our youngest to get her, on the intake and all that. And, I was just chatting with her and she was like, I was telling her kind of about some of our plans to kind of go global and everything. And she was like, she said, I've always thought about doing that because she wants to kind of travel. And she was like, and the good thing is I can do almost everything through telehealth now. She can just do Zoom meetings with people and do stuff like that. And so, we're at an interesting time where really a lot of things are going to change. People are going to realize you can do most work through Zoom. You can do most work through emailing contracts, doing this and that, everything. I even had, in one of the groups that I was in, somebody had talked about what does your office desk look like? I'm trying to figure out how to set up things and what kind of folders and binders and stuff I should have. I told them, I'm like, honestly, mine's a laptop. Like all my stuff is stored on, on the laptop. I'm like, and if I do end up writing anything down as soon as the meeting's over, which, because sometimes I just like to write, as soon as the meeting's over, I load it all up onto the computer and it's all there in a file.
Yeah.
But it's like everything's just, the way that we do business is changing. Everything's on the computers now. And no, it's just interesting, like the way that entrepreneurship is moving. I really do see it going to a more, global landscape. And I think that the opportunity there is bigger now than it's ever been, because, you figure how many people are there on the planet, how many of them have computers, almost all of them, right?
Yeah.
How many of them have access to internet, almost all of them, and how many of them are on Facebook? I think Facebook itself has, 3 point something like billion active users,
That's
there's no
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason for a small business to not succeed anymore. As long as you can work, online, you have unlimited people.
Yeah.
At no point in history has a small business had access to this many potential customers.
As long as you're willing to be online, as long as you are actually starting a business where there's actually a need for it, and like you're willing to provide like a quality product with good customer service, like you should be able to do okay.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing that's happening now too. So in the marketing world, I think it's called like story brand marketing. And it's essentially, I'm sure you've heard of it, but it's like using the Epiphany Bridge is a way that almost all stories are done. So at the beginning, you're like faced with some sort of a crisis or some sort of a problem. You hit a wall, then you overcome that wall, you overcome the obstacle, and then you are basically faced with like a real crisis. So you can either go this way towards transformation, or you can go this way towards your own demise. In the hero story, of course, they go through transformation and end up on the other side of that. And so this is essentially the Epiphany Bridge, and it's how almost all stories are written. If you want a good story, it's written in that format. And so what they're finding now is there's this story brand formation, which is essentially what they're doing. And it's a style of marketing where you're marketing through a story. And so you use that platform to basically sell things. You sell yourself, you can sell a product, you can sell a service. Whatever it is you're selling, use that. And it's actually incredibly effective. And so what they're finding now is influencer styles of marketing is a very popular up and coming way of marketing. And because of the rise in social media,
right,
one of the interesting things that we've been, talking about is like on social media, you want your page to almost be like a TV show. Right. So you want value. So, okay, you're going to offer value that people can learn something from you, be inspired, something that's funny. You want people to like seeing your stuff come up. You got to get them engaged, and then you have a sell. So it's like, value, 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 and then sell, and then value, 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 sell. So there's a whole algorithm to a lot of these things. And a lot of this stuff, again, is done through these storytelling. So because people, they buy from someone that they trust, they buy from people that they like, they buy from people that they, are like-minded. People like to support people that are like-minded. I think we've seen that in the political aspect these last few years, people that are just supporting people without even knowing anything about them, just because they have the same belief systems,
right.
But it's the same thing in sales. So when you're looking, and that's a huge thing too, is like some people, well, I'm not in sales, I'm trying to do this. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to be in sales because you're selling yourself or your business or your products. And so being able to adopt a lot of those things and kind of create an influencer type of persona for yourself, I think is going to be a huge way forward as well. The idea of branding as a company, there's still an aspect of that that's important, of course. But for the most part, I've seen a lot of like entrepreneurs go more for the branding yourself and selling yourself, and I've seen a lot of people have some good success with that.
No, that's true, because I mean, when you're branding yourself, you're creating your business becomes more personal. And like people more like now more than ever, people want to support a business that they feel personally connected to more so than they want to a trusted, relied brand. Partially because the trusted brands have been exposed, right?
Yeah.
It's like, for example, like people don't like, for example, because we were talking mess about the banks earlier. People want to go to their local credit union now more than ever than they want to go to Chase Bank.
Yeah.
Because those people are awful.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so it's like I don't want like because like you for a few decades, it was
Mhm,
the major corporation was a trusted brand. Well, they're
mhm,
successful and they're big, so they're doing it right. We can trust
mhm,
them with I can trust them with my money. I can trust their product. I can trust this. And like now it's like, well, all the major corporations are just getting cheap product from overseas. They're
mhm.
getting bailed out by the government. They're misusing my money. They hate my values. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to give them my money.
Yeah.
But it's like if I can, like I can go to a small business online, like that. I know the person. I can see the face of the person who owns it and operates it.
Mhm,
Like he's talking to, like I can see a video from him through the internet.
mhm,
Like he's not overly produced.
mhm,
He's like running inside of his house. Oh, it's a small business. He's like me, that kind of thing. Like there's
mhm.
so many different levels to this. So we're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, where people are like, oh, and like I get to hear his story about his business and his journey.
Yeah.
Like there's like I would rather I want my money to go to this than
Mhm,
a faceless Walmart or faceless Chase or like all these
mhm.
kind of like different things. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and because, you figure, okay, so if Facebook has 3.2 billion or whatever, I don't know the exact numbers, active users on there, how many of them are going to be doing the same thing that I'm doing, right? How many of them are social
yeah,
media managers? There's going to be a lot of them out there.
yeah,
So the idea again becomes, okay, well, why would somebody buy from me versus one of the other, million social media managers out there? And it comes down to, well, because they're buying from me, not from that person or that person or that person. Whereas we may have the same product, we may even have the same level of product, right? In terms of pricing, value, and all the things that we can bring to the table. But I am someone who's like working and has 3 children, and I work with God, and I believe all those things, and I'm a liberty lover, and I'm all those things. That might be the make or break point, because you
right,
might have somebody who sits there and says, look, you're both offering the same exact thing, but you're someone whose values I align with, and so I'm happier to support your family, as terrible as it sounds, than this person's.
yeah,
And because in reality, that's what we all do. We all like to support people that we are mostly aligned with. It's the same thing. What happened with what was that bean company? There was a bean company that I guess did something that was like anti-liberal, and all the liberals, all over the
oh
newspapers,
yeah,
and
Goya,
all the conservatives went out there. Goya, yes, all the conservatives went out there and bought all their stuff, and then their stocks and everything rose like crazy. Well, because we like
yeah,
to support people that are like-minded, right? So we sat there and said, hey, you did something, they're trying to punish you for it, I want to go out and help, you know and that's really what happens. It's and then But on the same token, you have things like Bud Light, right? So Bud Light makes terrible marketing choices, and what happens? All their stuff's plummets, because they alienated their entire
right.
market capital, because people like to support people who are aligned with their own beliefs, right?
And now Modelo's king. I'm gonna be honest. I did not expect that Bud Light thing to.
I
I thought it was just gonna be like a dip for like a couple weeks, and then they'd go back to
Mhm.
like doing what they were doing. That actually was surprising.
Yeah. Well, and we'll see what happens with Fox News, right? Because they got rid of Tucker Carlson. And
Yeah,
Tucker Carlson is literally the top of all of cable. He was the
yeah,
most moneymaker of all of cable. So, you see stuff like that, and it's like these are terrible marketing choices, because, you're alienating your entire target audience. Um, but that's really what it comes down to. Again, it's like it's that face, right? Tucker Carlson was the face of Fox News, essentially,
it was the most popular news show
right?
for years, and probably the most. I think it was for not just in that moment, but like if you went back into a certain period of history, he was
Hmm.
the the most popular high demand news show like
Oh,
for a
yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
And then Fox was like, "We're
Yeah.
done."
Yeah, but it's right, exactly. But it's all about that persona. It's,
Yeah,
what do you think of when you think of this company and that brand, and who does that make you think of? And then you look at that, and it's, well, okay, the people that are attracted to that are going to be the people that are buying from you.
yeah,
And so when you're marketing your own product as an entrepreneur, you need to think about that. Who are
yeah.
people that are going to be attracted to who I am as a person? And you need to upsell that, because that's what's going to get people to come in. That's what's going to get people to trust you, like you, and want to buy from you, versus all the other people that they're going to talk to.
And for a lot
Um,
of people now, that's Twitter instead of Fox News.
Yeah. Yes. Or X now, as they're
Oh yeah,
calling
I'm sorry, X. Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. My
Yes.
my apology. Yeah,
I know. He's taking it at an interesting avenue. We'll see where it goes, but
yeah.
yeah.
I'm keep trying to not. I'm working hard not to get like overly excited about it because like a lot of things that he's saying, I'm kind of like, man, that sounds a lot like WeChat, and I'm not interested in that. I was like, I don't want an American WeChat. I'm good.
I've never even heard of that. What's WeChat?
That's like, so WeChat is China's like everything app.
Oh,
You text through it, you call through it, you make purchases through it, and it's basically like gets surveyed, like the government watches it.
yeah.
So like
That makes sense.
it's like their everything app.
Mhm.
And like Elon keeps talking about making X the everything app.
Mhm.
And the everything app is, I believe, is his terminology. It's not the WeChat's terminology.
Yeah.
But like yeah. So like WeChat, they
Basically the
use
same
that for
thing.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of like, man, like just stick to electric cars and free speech and
Right.
rockets, and you'll be good. Like we'll be good.
Yeah. I like him, but the
Yeah.
skeptic in me is always like, if you're that high in the chain, there's something going on. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like because like for the longest time, I'm like, man, Elon Musk keeps saying some really, really good stuff. And I was like, he hasn't got arrested or suicided yet. And for some reason that makes me
Right.
uncomfortable.
Right.
I'm like, who did he make deals with?
Right. All of them. That's why he's well, you know what though? I mean, you look at like things like like Tesla, for example. The only reason
Yeah.
that still exists is because of all the government subsidies that he's accepted throughout the years. And
Yes.
not that I personally have a problem with it, because I get it. If you're trying to make a business, might as well take advantage of all the offers you have.
Right.
But he's got to have some connections based on all those years
Yeah.
of working together. So
He also did pay his government loans back early,
yeah,
unlike GM and yeah.
yeah.
But like yeah, he did get them. But
Yeah.
I'm excited about because you did mention the whole like the local small business has the opportunity to be global now in a way that they
Mhm.
didn't have before, and that actually is like really exciting. Like
Yeah.
I'm excited to see like what that opportunity that has, because like kind of like my thought has been like the future for business is like the major corporations aren't going anywhere. That's
Mhm.
just like Amazon, Walmart, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, because of the internet and the technology, small business has the opportunity to be successful in a way that it has never been before.
Mhm.
And so it's like what we'll probably see is the weaning out of a lot of like medium to large businesses.
Mhm.
The mega ones will stay around, but like small businesses will have an opportunity to thrive like they never have before.
Mhm.
And so like for some people on the outside looking in, they might look at it and be like, right now is the worst time to start a business because corporations are too powerful.
Mhm.
But because of the internet, like in technology, small businesses actually have the best opportunity to be successful than they have in a long time. And so
Yeah.
like when you're talking about them being able to go global, I was like, that's exciting and that's a reality.
Mhm.
And like, why, if you want to, why not hop into that right now?
Oh, absolutely. And I even kind of want to touch on what you were just saying about the big companies not going under, because I think here's my prediction, because you have these big companies, and of course it's easy to sit there and say they'll never go under, but the reality is a lot of these companies are like going down. So like if you look at Amazon stock, for instance, that's been going down quite a bit recently. Disney stocks have plummeted, and Disney, they're just now actually raising their rates. So I don't know if you know this, but Disney Plus, they're raising their rates because they're losing so much revenue that they have to,
Aren't they trying to sell Disney Plus right now?
which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know, but like, but my point is like even a big empire like Disney is feeling it. And so you see these big companies and you realize that, a lot of them are starting to feel a lot of the pressure of people going smaller into smaller businesses.
Yeah.
And you also look at, within the past, during the whole COVID thing, how many businesses had to get bailed out by the government, which is something that I personally don't agree with. To me, I
Yeah.
like the whole idea of free market capitalism. If a business is going under, they need to go under. I don't know why
Right.
the government feels like it's their need to bail out a company. Why are they getting involved? But the reality is all these big companies that are around, probably about 90% of them have been bailed out at some point by the government. And
Yeah.
so the reality there is how many of them would really be around had it actually been a free market economy, which people think we are, but we're not.
We have the illusion of capitalism in the free market.
Yeah. But like if they were actually allowed to run their course, how many of them would still exist? And so then the question becomes, well, okay, if the government's bailing them out, why are they bailing them out? And is it possible for a regime change in which that would no longer happen? So I think it'll be interesting to see how things go. We do have the presidential election coming up, which we don't know how that'll go exactly. And then, as things start to go into a more global scale, it'll be interesting to see how some of these big companies decide to compete with that, because they can't keep losing revenue, right?
Yeah.
It's just not sustainable. And so the question will become is, at what point do we let them fail? Or are they going to have to adapt what they're doing to meet a broader audience? So it'll be interesting to see how things play out, definitely.
I mean, I would be more than happy to be, and to be wrong about corporations, and to some extent, I mean, like what I said was not fully true, and like you gave an example, like with Disney, and I mean, we have seen a couple like banks fail recently as well, and so like they're not. I did say that they were bulletproof, and that's not actually like what I think. I don't think I fully meant that, because like they do get bailed out like all the time.
Yeah.
And so like it'd be great if they weren't consistently getting bailed out. And like you do see like Disney is in kind of like panic mode right now. Like Disney Plus isn't doing well. A lot of their movies are not doing well at the box office, and you said they're raising their rates. And I think I heard that like at Disney World or whatever, like they were having to restructure how they were doing some things and like that kind of thing. So like when I hear that, like I get excited and encouraged.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like I've never been a fan of Disney. Even like when I was growing up, I wasn't a fan of Disney. Right? Not for the same reasons that I'm not a fan of them today.
Yeah. But on the plus side, right? So you see these big companies that have been conglomerates for forever, and they're starting to go down, and you see these smaller kind of smaller operations that are taking their place. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting, so Angel Studios, I don't know if you follow them.
Of course. We went and saw Sound of Freedom like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one blew up at the box office. That one's been a tremendous success. They also did The Chosen, which is a really popular show.
Yeah.
And they've got plenty more that are coming out that I'm like wicked excited about, to be honest. They actually have a free streaming platform where they stream all of their stuff on. So Sound of Freedom is not on there yet, obviously, because it's still in box office, but I'm sure it will be once it's out, once it's out of there. But they actually have a platform, and they've got kids shows on there. They've got, The Chosen's on there. They've got a bunch of other shows as well, and movies and stuff like that. It's still really small because they're still an up and coming thing.
Right.
But they're interesting because how Hollywood has Hollywood backing them, which over the years, it's like every year the Oscars and the Emmys and stuff have less and less people attending and watching. And like every year it just gets worse and worse and less people care about it. And now you've got something like Angel Studios, which is up and coming, and they have everything is watcher funded, basically. So every single project that they take on, they do a crowdfunding thing, and the movie only gets made if people want to see it. And I think that that's a really interesting strategy, because literally the studio company does not put up any money for these things. Instead, what they do is they start a crowdsourcing, and then they sit there and say, here's the concept of what we want to make. Here's the, all the details of it. And if people want to, they can put money into it. And then enough people put money into it, and then it gets made.
Have you heard of, I believe it's pronounced Lore.tv?
No, what is it?
So it's a startup of entertainment and streaming. And a lot of what they're doing is, I'm friends with the guy, Marcus Pittman, who's starting it on, I'm friends with him on Facebook. I can probably connect you if you want me to. But like what he's basically starting, it's an entertainment outlet as well. And a lot of the shows that they're working on starting are crowdfunded as well. And I believe they have a subscription model, but since they're brand new, they're also like crowdsourcing a lot of stuff. And and like they got children's shows, they got documentaries, they got like all these different kind of things that they're working on as well, and it's independent.
Yeah.
And so like kind of like one of the things we keep going back to is like there's more opportunity to start up now than there has ever been.
Yeah.
And like there's a demand for these things than more so than there has ever been. And so
Yeah.
like even though like I think it's still I don't like I'm excited about what the opportunity there is for things to start up more so than ever, and I'm excited about the opportunity for small business more so than ever. I do. There is still a challenge with the major corporations, and so um, but like we are seeing things heading in the right direction though, and I think there is a message being sent by people that hey, like we don't
Yeah.
like what's going on, and we want to support these new things. And so like you see like Sound of Freedom came out, and they had like they did not want that movie to come out. Disney didn't want it to come out. Netflix didn't want it to come out. Amazon didn't want it to come out, and I don't understand why, but I kind of know why.
We all know why. Let's be honest.
And then somehow like Angel was like, we're gonna figure out a way to get it out, and they got a lot of theaters to like say we'll do a weekend or we'll do a week.
Yeah.
And like it did better than Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, well, I guess we'll give it another week. And then they're like, okay, we'll give it another week and another week.
Yeah.
And so like, like there's a lot of.
Yes. And at a time when movie theaters are going out of business. This is a time period when movie theaters are going out of business, and it's doing that well. So I think that that's definitely noteworthy. But
like, it's an encouraging time. It's like if there's any for people who want to start something, like do like this is like the time.
Yeah.
Like if you want to like create art, like this is the time. If you want to start like just a business, this is like the time. Like you have more tools at your disposal than like you ever have. And like it's probably only going to hope it will continue to get better. I'm not gonna say hopefully it will. I'm gonna say like it is going to continue to like keep getting better.
Yeah. I think like most things in life, right? Things are cyclical. And so I think what I'm seeing happening, and I think it's not a mistake that what's happening in Hollywood, where the whole Hollywood elitism that's been going on, this big industry that's been created, is slowly being phased out while more independent type of things are emerging. I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's happening for a reason. And I see the same thing happening with big business. So you see these big businesses that are slowly phasing out. The only reason they haven't phased out already is because the government keeps bailing them out, but they're slowly phasing out. And then you've got these smaller businesses that are coming up to take their place. And I think a lot of that is natural, what's happening. But I also think a lot of it is almost a sense of decentralization as well. So like, again, kind of going back to the whole like concept of liberty being not being tied to something, is this idea of, you can have a big empire like the US government, right? Which has their hands in all these different things like Hollywood, big business, that essentially have this whole hierarchy at which they dominate so many things, where once that structure is broken down and you start to get rid of that and arise all different kinds of things to take its place, you end up with a decentralized situation. So instead of, one big Amazon type of thing, maybe now there's 4 or 5 different Amazon-like things that the best of the best will be, appealing to certain types of people. And those will be, all really big. And, Walmart is essentially a similar thing to Amazon, except they have in-person stores. And to be honest, a lot of these in-person stores, you drive around now and everything's up for lease because commercial properties, nobody wants that anymore. Everybody can do online shopping. And so again, when you come to the globalization concept, it's really a decentralization of where life is going, because people are realizing that, hey, I don't have to be tied to something. I don't have to go to the store. I can have it shipped to me. I don't have to go into work. I can do it at home. I don't have to, go to whatever movie Hollywood is making. Now there are several crowd-funded types of entertainment pieces, and I can find something that's more aligned with my values, and these are the types of things that are coming up. And it really is like I said, it's really an interesting time, because I think the people that are going to take advantage of it now are going to be at the top of it in 5 to 10 years when it really becomes bigger. And that's my prediction. So I could totally be wrong, but these are the trends I'm seeing, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
I think there's a lot of, it makes sense. Like it may not fully end up in the exact same spot, that you're thinking, but like, I don't see how it doesn't end up partially like where you're thinking.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like there's a lot of commercial space up for rents, and like they're staying for rents. I've heard about places in New York, these gigantic skyscrapers, they're having a hard time like renting out floors, and they're staying vacant. And those the people that own those businesses, are those buildings that they built to rent, are having a hard time like making money off of them. Um, and like and so like there's a you're kind of seeing it, like you to some extent, like part of what you're talking about like is visible, and you kind of have to be in denial to not see it. The other part of it's kind of like, this is the direction that we're seeing things go, and like it looks awesome.
Yeah. But you see the decentralization in everything. You have the cryptocurrencies that are emerging. You've got Hollywood and entertainment. You've got, even the political spectrum. There's so many people that are realizing that this duopoly is really, what do they say? Two wings of the same bird,
Right.
And so you just really see like that decentralization is really happening all across the board. So I think there's a huge like mental shift that's happening. Who knows how far it'll go? But I think at this point, it's already been tipped, I think COVID really did it for a lot of people. Because like you said, when people had the opportunity to work at home, to really not have to interact in the world, when everything halted and they realized, wow, life is still here, I think that was a big eye opener for a lot of people. A lot of people switched to homeschooling. Homeschooling skyrocketed. A lot of people even bought homes in like rural areas that they never would have bought homes in before, because now they're remote, so they don't have to worry about, working or living close to work, You don't
have to put up with the city anymore to make money.
Right, exactly. You could have your homestead out in the middle of nowhere and work a remote job, So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where everything goes. I'm really excited. But...
Awesome. This was good. I'm glad we stayed on for an extra, what was it, 30, 40 minutes?
Yeah.
But thanks for coming on, for real. And
yeah, of course.
Even though we stayed on for an extra 40 minutes, we should do it again.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's always stuff to talk about. So
if people want to reach out to you about solar panels, social media, or just homeschooling, liberty, like just life, where can they find you?
So the best places, I guess, would be on Facebook. So facebook.com/Michelle McCartney SMM is my social media page. You can get a hold of me there. If anybody's interested in solar panels, we work in 30 states. Texas is one of them. And you can definitely put in your information. It's Getting Solar. So GettingSolar.com/info, or I'm sorry, .info. My bad.
Nice.
So it's gettingsolar.info. And that's the actual website. And then once you go on there, you can enter in all your information. It'll send it right to me. And then I can get in contact with you, see if you qualify, and get you booked for the appointment. So that's the best place for solar. And then, like I said, Facebook is the best place to get in touch with me. And, I'll talk to anybody about anything. So
cool. And you mentioned an old podcast, just in case.
Oh, yes. So Mothers Illuminated. So if anybody goes on YouTube, you just search in Mothers Illuminated. I think there's something around 20 something episodes. Eventually I'll get back into it and do it again. I enjoyed it a lot. But got to wait till things cool down a bit.
Right. And we'll go ahead and link all that stuff down below. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, click the bell. Any comments or anything you want to add to the conversation, go ahead and drop that below. Please go and subscribe to Michelle in whichever way you see fit, through her businesses, through her social media. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.